Welcome to the No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast, an unfiltered look into the global vacation and short-term rental industry.
I'm Mateo Bradford.
And I'm John Stokinger.
And this is our podcast. We bring the right people to the table at the right time, giving you an inside view and take on the short-term rental industry like no other podcast can. This season of the No BS Pod is proudly brought to you by our friends Beyond and Costco. Beyond offers you the tools you need to get, grow, and optimize your revenue.
And Casago's best-in-class tech streamlines operations for the local traditional vacation rental management company, making them the local heroes with a global presence.
Our podcast is not possible without the generosity of our sponsors. Make sure to check out their exclusive offers specifically geared for our No BS listeners.
Morning, Mateo. How are you, man?
Oh, man, I'm really good, man. I am fresh back from Puerto Rico. Relaxed a little bit, had a little bit of a scare, dude. Like actually rolls into what we're going to talk about with our guests and stuff today. Had a little accident out in Puerto Rico, a little slip fall, head crack, stitches for my mom.
Yeah, you're telling me about that last night, man. That's she's good though.
She's good. She's surprisingly 78 years strong. 12 stitches later. She's upstairs dancing right now. I can actually hear it. So so she's all right, but it was a little bit scary. And actually I was like, when those instances of, being in the industry, and of course we stayed in a short-term rental, didn't stay in a hotel, those things are real life situations. Hospitals in a foreign land, and Puerto Rico is a Commonwealth of the United States, but it is it not equal on those terms yet, but got really good care. But it was one of those things where you were just like, wow, you're never really prepared for that.
Right. Shit happens, but I'm glad it turned out the right way.
It is. And had a great trip though, and was great to be back. Super energized. Think I'm a little tanner, if that's possible.
Well, you look more relaxed. You look like
I definitely am. Needed that.
You were able to decompress a little bit.
I needed some Puerto Rico. Needed to be with my people for a little bit, so it was good.
That's good. We huge week last week for us. Still, the biggest episode, biggest first week ever for the No BS Short-Term Rental Podcast with the Vacasa interview. Shout out to Vacasa and JB for jumping on. Also want to go ahead and give a shout out to our new sponsors, which you've already heard, but we're really excited that both Casago and
Beyond,
and Beyond have jumped on with us. So really excited about that.
Grateful.
But without further ado, season 3, episode 2, with the one and only, we have an amazing guest, Koryn Okey, VP of Client Experience at Breezway. Thanks so much for joining us, Koryn.
Welcome,
I'm
Koryn.
So excited to be here. Thanks, guys.
We were talking pre hitting record here about, we talk often on the podcast about why we do this podcast the way we do it and why it's not a tips and tricks. And it all started when Mateo and I met in Gatlinburg back at a VRM Intel event 5.5 years ago. I'm assuming now that seems about right. I was with Ascent, you were with Rented at the time. We were both like doe-eyed, fresh into the industry, just like going like, what the hell is going on here? And in Gatlinburg of all places, which is like a little weird if you've never been to Gatlinburg before, it's definitely an experience all on its own. And so we talk a lot about us meeting, but the most interesting thing, Koryn, is that you were actually the first person outside of my team at Ascent that I ever met in the industry. Before the event, we had lunch. Do you remember that?
I remember with Christine.
Yes.
I don't remember where we were, but I can picture it. Yeah.
I can't remember either. It was actually, I remember the restaurant. It was, I don't know the road, but we went down this, it was on the left-hand side next to an ice cream shop or something like that. I don't know.
Absolutely. And she's like, I'm going to bring my new colleague, John. And I was like, okay, sure. And I knew Christine from her prior life before she joined Ascent. And we were very close when she was a client of mine, when she was with Jackson Mountain Homes. So it was just sort of a meld. And the first time that we met, and that feels like a long time ago. And I'm glad I didn't scare you off.
Well, a little, I mean, a little bit. It was interesting though, because like I think at that time you were relatively fresh into Breezeway, and we want to talk about the Koryn story. We want to get to know you, and obviously, from you didn't just start at Breezeway out of the blue. Like you had years of experience in the industry prior to that. But I think you were probably just a few months in to Breezeway at that time, because
I started with Breezeway in 2017. So I think, it was probably maybe a year, the second year that we were operating. So it was definitely early on in the Breezeway timeline. So
how did you get into, we all have that, like, stumbled into the, the short-term rental space, story. But how did you're no longer Boston. We'll talk about that, but you were years in Boston. I'm actually wearing the wrong hat today.
There you go. Supporting the hometown pride.
There you go. But how did you stumble into the industry? You spent almost 7 years at FlipKey, but prior to like what got you into that? And let's talk about that, your transition and your.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. Everybody in this industry stumbles into it. Whether it's, I had a property, I started a property management company because I couldn't find somebody to do it, or my scenario, so I grew up in Ohio, went to college in Ohio, moved to Boston, was working at a big Fortune 500 company, and then really just wasn't happy. I was young in a new city, wanted to meet people, and moved over and started working at Boston Magazine, which was like the city magazine. They had a couple of brands, and it was at my place in life. It was amazing. But I was there for about 5 years and sort of getting antsy. There wasn't a lot of additional growth opportunity, and was like, oh, I'm going to, start looking. And I had a friend who was also looking, and she came back from an interview and she said, so I just interviewed at this company. I don't want the job, but it might be something that you want. And I guess hindsight, like, why didn't you want the job? Why did you think I would want it, but you might not? And that was sort of the way that I fell into. So I guess I owe that friend a lot of credit and gratitude, because that's how I fell into the industry. Ended up doing some interviews and joining the team at FlipKey as the 8th employee at that time. So the acquisition by TripAdvisor, we were majority owned by them when I actually joined. But we still fully operated on our own, and we did so for about 4.5 years. And really, I learned this industry. I don't even think, and I think it's probably true for so many of us, when we're younger, that we stayed in vacation rentals, but we didn't really know that's what they were, right? When I grew up, we went to Ocean City, Maryland, and we always stayed in like condos, but it was like the hotel. And that's sort of what my parents always referred to it. And now looking back, I'm like, I've been in vacation rentals and I've been staying in vacation rentals for, as long as I can remember. And so I sort of fell into it that way. And I spent almost 7 years at FlipKey, and then we would ultimately go on to be fully acquired and sort of rebranded as TripAdvisor Vacation Rentals. Took about 1.5 years off, and then
can we pause for just 1 second?
Yeah,
I want to pause about FlipKey, because if you think about those 8, you were the 8th employee at FlipKey. Yeah. Let's talk about. These are some players in the space even today. One you're still working with, or maybe, but who were these 8? Like, who of these 8 are still in the space, and where are they now?
Let's see. So one of the founders, so there were 3 founders of FlipKey, TJ Mahoney, Carl Query, and Jeremy Gall. And Jeremy is still in the VR space. He's the founder of Breezeway. He went on after leaving, after selling and then leaving FlipKey to found Breezeway. TJ's doing some investment and VC. There were a couple of engineers, one of which actually was one of the co-founders with Jeremy, and he really came in and did a lot of the technical work that sort of created Breezeway. So
Okay.
he
Interesting.
was one of the first engineers from FlipKey. And then there was, I think, a product guy who's kind of gone on to do a lot of tech. And then some folks who are listening might remember Brian Goodwin, who left and then went and started selling beer delivery. And
What
he
about
was
was David Kornblit? Was he part of that too back then? Kornblit?
David started, he started a few years later.
Okay.
But yeah, he was definitely there.
And he's no longer in the space.
He's no longer in the VR
He's
space
moved
either.
on after exploring and moved on. But interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I knew there were some people there that and I just kind of wanted to wrap my head around it a little bit more.
Yeah. I think the one most people will probably know is Jeremy. He's been around. I think his first VRMA conference might have been like 2006. And he's spoken and been involved pretty significantly over the last, 16, 18 years. So
yeah,
not
just a couple of years.
a little bit.
Hey, you're not on the accounting team at Breezeway.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. A hat I do not wear. But thankfully for everyone.
Okay, so I apologize for pausing. So the
No.
FlipKey went. You almost 7 years there. You had a little. You got out.
I got out. I thought I was done, and I went to a small startup that did influencer marketing, and I realized very quickly that like I'd much rather be talking about vacation rentals than the shade of lipstick that people were wearing. It wasn't my jam. I wasn't a YouTube fanatic, but I really missed. And we talk about as a VR industry, the fragmentation, right, that has sort of historically existed. The industry, the influencer marketing space that I was in for a short time is even more fragmented. And I really missed very quickly the camaraderie and the collaborative nature that exists within VR. And so I got a call in 2016 from Jeremy, and I always laugh about this because I believe pretty significantly in like, things happen for a reason, and there are signs about why you should or shouldn't do things. And my very first VRMA conference was at Wild Horse Pass in Chandler, Arizona. 2008, it was my very first VRMA. And the year that Jeremy called me and said, hey, what are you doing in October? I want to go, meet up with some of our old friends in the VR industry and show them what we've been building at Breezeway. In 2016, VRMA was at Wild Horse Pass in Chandler, Arizona. And I thought, wow, this is really full circle. This was my first VRMA with FlipKey, and now my first VRMA
10 years later.
With
Wow.
Breezeway 8 years later. Yeah.
That's insane.
Which is wild. And so I joined the team. I was actually the first employee there. And I think we're up to about 60-ish people now, which is kind of crazy. In about 5.5 years.
Yeah.
Have you spent hours determining what rate you should charge at your short-term rental property?
Of course you have. This is a huge part of the vacation rental business, and it can be tricky knowing if your place is on par with other properties in the area. But now you don't have to wonder. You don't have to worry. And that's because it's so much easier pricing out your properties with Beyond Pricing.
Here's how it works. Beyond uses a dynamic pricing tool along with in-depth market research to make sure your property is valued exactly how it should be. They take dozens of factors into account, including your property's location, other rental rates in the area, any amenities on your property, nearby attractions, all of the things that most of us just wouldn't think about when pricing our own properties. That way you don't miss out on profits, and your guests feel confident in the rate that they're paying, so they come back again and again and again.
That's a win-win. And it gets even better. Beyond's platform is easy to use, so you can save time and think about other areas of your business, or enjoy your free time a little more now that you won't be stressing out about the rate you're charging. There's a reason why hundreds of single and multi-property owners trust Beyond's platform to determine what they should charge guests. Beyond is dedicated to the short-term rental community. It's where their business was born, and it's where they intend to stay.
Don't wait, get the profits you deserve. Go to gobeyondpricing.com/no-bs for a free portfolio assessment and a $30 credit when you sign up. That's go.beyondpricing.com/no-bs. Thanks for listening. And now let's get back to the episode. Yeah, and you've in like all companies that are going through this crazy scale and this crazy growth, it's interesting to see who has stayed and who has gone and the churn that happens. But it's always for the better, especially during this time of the resignation era over through COVID. Like obviously I spent a couple of years at TravelNet. I was, my time was, my 2 years was done. And I moved on to, and I wouldn't say bigger and better. I'm going to say better right now, but it's interesting to see these life cycles of people in this space. And, there's some, I could think of like Adam Norco, who left you all and is doing super successful things over at Inhabit right now. Yeah. And there's tons of, you guys built a great team and you still have an amazing team. It's nice to see what you guys are doing.
Well, I think it's a testament to the industry, right? Because especially as you said with this, like the resignation era, right? Like if you're not working with people that you enjoy working with, whether it's your colleague or your client, that's what's going to spur that, right? Like if you were working with a bunch of jerks, nobody's going to want to like have conversations. But we're really lucky in this space that 95% of the time, sometimes there are people that are frustrated and upset about something, but 95% of the time we're able to like really provide a service that makes people's business better. And then, you feel good about doing that, or you feel good about being able to solve a problem that they're having, sometimes not as quickly as you want, but ultimately being able to give them that interaction and that support to continue to move forward. And I think, we've seen that. We've built an incredible team. I mean, I moved over when I started at Breezeway. I was Mateo. You said that's not the role you wear at Breezeway, but when I started, I was doing like billing and product and marketing. I mean, I wasn't doing it all, but I was influencing it, and sales and support and onboarding. And I couldn't even figure out how many years that was. I'm not the one that should be billing anybody. We have people that know a lot more about that now, but we've built a really strong team and we've grown substantially, and that has been great. But it's also been great because some of the people that we did bring in have sort of taken on different roles within the company. Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, that sort of speaks to, the industry and the culture that we've been able to sort of create.
And that's startup life too, right? Yeah. Like it's everyone's a Swiss Army knife to a certain extent, right? Because you have to, even if you're not the best of that tool, you're enough, and not tool in the bad sense, but like oh, it's a great morning. But again, everyone's playing different roles and has, a broad enough skill set to get it done and push forward, right? And we did it at Rented, and with At Ease, what we're doing now, it's the same thing, and it's exciting, looking at the future too, and knowing that change is part of growth, right? And talk to us a little bit about what you've seen and what has excited you with the growth that you've seen and been a part of at Breezeway, because you guys do a lot. And you have a large offering, and oftentimes that can be detrimental to companies, right? When investors and other people want you to dial into one thing and be good at one thing, instead of having a broad offering that customers can take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. So when I talk about what Breezeway has, right, we basically have three sort of segments within our business. We have our operations tool. It's what we came out of the gate with. It's what a lot of people know the product for. In 2019, we also launched a messaging product. So it allows folks to interact via SMS through automation directly with their guests. And a lot of our integrations with the PMS companies make that really, really easy for them. And then we also have our safety and certification program, which my colleague, Justin, who everybody knows, runs. And so we sort of have three different things. And one of our sort of initial stances, I guess, if you will, right, was that we wanted to focus on this operational piece of the business because there is just so much that it encompasses and that it sort of touches on. And I've told this story before, but when Jeremy kind of came up with and introduced this idea of our messaging product, right, the guest interaction, the guest texting, I was sort of like, oh, what are we doing? Like, this operations line has so much, right, that people need, and so many pieces of it that we can still expand on. And I, for me, and I hate admitting this on this podcast, but like Jeremy just sees such a bigger picture, and he understands sort of where all the pieces line up. And, his comment to me at the time was that like the guest texting piece after a guest arrives is an operational issue, right? They're calling you because something, or they're contacting you because something is wrong, or they need support, or they need somebody to come by, or whatever that is. And so it's this natural integration that still focuses on the operational efficiency, but touches a little bit of a different need within the business. And so I think that's sort of been, that's been one of the things that has helped us be successful, is sort of keeping that mindset of like, we're really focused on the back of house, the operations folks, and giving them the tools they need to be more effective in their job. And then, just listening, right? Listening to what our clients need and where their struggles are. For years, we heard about the challenges around tracking inventory, how that sort of impacted managers. And that is something that we were, there's still ways to go, and iterations and improvements that can be made, but we now have that. And so I think that, and John, you also know this from your experience, the more that you can listen to what your customers actually need and then build those things versus saying, I'm going to give you this thing that I think you need. That makes it way easier to drive the adoption, but it also makes it way easier to actually have a true impact on their business. Sure. And so I think, those are some of the things we've really kind of focused on, which I think have been helpful.
You mentioned Jeremy's vision, right? And earlier on here, and it brings me back to actually probably 6 months after I met you is the first time I met Jeremiah. And when we were, I think it was in Charleston at a Mind and Dine event. And at that time, he was doing a presentation. It was all about Jeff Bezos. Like the whole presentation was about Bezos. And I'm like, this guy is out there. And I'm like, but holy shit, this stuff resonates. Like I get it. But it's almost over my head. And I was still at that time trying to grasp the industry. And I'm like, what is he doing? And I'm like, wow, I'm sold. I was sold at that. That was still, I think you were there too. I think it was both you and Jeremiah. But it's interesting to like, you're talking about his vision, and it's always been that, and I could see how when Jeremy reaches out to you and he says, hey, you want to come, and back 8 years, 10 years, whatever that math was, later back to Chandler to kind of go and meet up and kind of jump in on this journey again with me and talk about it. I could see how that would be hard to say no, to work with someone that with because you guys had worked together in the past and you built something together, and to know that his vision, I don't want to sit here and like pray, like he's a smart dude,
smart guy. Yeah. But I think the other thing is that like, I in my head remember thinking like, okay, and kind of having like a hard time, because I'm thinking like, okay, I hear what you're saying, right? I hear what this concept is and conceptually what you want to give and what you want to build. But in my head, I kept thinking they're already doing this, right? Like they're already turning properties over. And it really and truly wasn't until like he and I started, like we went to lunch and we started talking through it a lot more. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I only understand the front end marketing side from my time at FlipKey, right? And I remember all I ever really knew about like housekeeping and maintenance and things like that were those things that were brought up in reviews. And I didn't really understand the complexity around what managers were doing in the back. And like, yeah, they were doing it, quote unquote, but like it was painful. And the appetite and the excitement from folks when we introduced what they were sort of contemplating and putting together was palpable. And I left there, I sort of went to it thinking like, oh, I'll go and I'll help them out. And, I'll get to see some old friends. And by the end of the conference, I was like, yeah, no, like this is going to be great. And so it was really cool. But that full circle moment to be able to be like, all right, here we are. So I don't know when they're going back to Chandler, but hopefully not for a while.
Yeah, it's not a good sign. It's always a change for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it is a good sign. Who knows? Hey, everyone. This episode is brought to you by Casago. And we...
John, you mean Casago?
No, I meant Casago.
John, that's not how you say it. You gotta get our sponsor's name right, man.
Anyway, as I was saying before I got cut off, this episode is brought to you by Casago. And if you haven't heard of them, then here's the deal. Casago helps bring the biggest tech and strategy to the local operators so they can take on the big players. Casago's franchise model really does streamline the operations of the local and traditional vacation rental management company, making them the local heroes with a global presence.
And the industry changing as much as it has, Casago's not only bringing these high-powered tools to the local operators, but they're also creating something even more powerful by making sure everyone is in the community and constantly learning from different markets and operators.
We tell you this because they've joined us to get this exclusive offer just for checking them out a little bit more. Go to casago.com/nobs. That is casago.com/NOBS to book your discovery call. What's included, you ask? A review of your business operation expenses to identify where you can save money, information on how to partner with Casago or Casago to scale your company, and a free $100 Amazon gift card for attending their 1-hour discovery call. Now let's get back to the pod.
So it's Casago.
No, it's for sure Casago.
You have no idea what you're talking about. It's Casago.
No, dude, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Whatever. Let's get back to the business.
Let's talk, we know what Breezeway is. It's you mentioned that you've talked about where you are. Like you mentioned that there are other, why come in and do something when others are already doing this? There's already processes in place and for operations, but now you've come in and you set, as in Breezeway, set the gold standard. I know from working with Track, Track had, a solid operations, but, there was things that I felt that Track did decently or comparable, but there's definitely things that Breezeway did overall in the operation that was the gold standard. There's things that I feel that we were trying to replicate. And again, this is my opinion, not Track's opinion, but we were trying to go ahead and replicate because you definitely had the gold standard. Like, where do you go now? Because as the gold standard, imitation is flattery, right? But there's a lot of going, oh shit, Breezeway's doing it this way, and they have a lot of clients, and they're making people happy. We need to be able to offer these same things, and we need to be able to do it less expensive, or we need to be able to do it, offer it this way, or part of a subscription, a different model. Like, how are you combating that?
So I will say I always use the analogy, and listen, we have great partners, and Track obviously is one of them. And it's instrumental to the success of our business and that of our clients, of course, and our clients being able to use the platform. So I don't knock any of the PMSs. I'm glad that we're not a PMS, because you're asked to do a lot for your clients. And for us, we're asked to do a lot, but solely focused on this one part of the business. And so I'm very grateful for that. But I always use the analogy of, like, it's the same reason that you have a PCP and an ear, nose, and throat, or you have an eye doctor and an ophthalmologist, or a glaucoma specialist, or whatever it is, right? Like, we get to be that player who plays nicely with your PMS to make your life easy, but is really focused on that. And so I think, I think you're right. Imitation is flattery, and it's great. And I agree. I think we were really fortunate to be able to set the sort of concept of property care. Like, I don't ever remember that really being like a phrase that people regularly used, 10 years ago. But I think for us, it's just about really listening to the clients and digging into the features that we have and continuing to improve on those. Because I think we have a really good foundation, but there's more that can be done, right? Giving clients more flexibility around how they schedule, or what they schedule, or when it gets scheduled, making some things be a little bit more cohesive, driving some additional value around reporting to homeowners and things like that. So I think it's just sort of looking at the offerings that we have today and just sort of taking them to the next level, because we're really fortunate that the baseline that we've already built is pretty impactful for clients' businesses.
I agree. So one of the interesting things that I think in your role specifically, right, like dealing with the experience of your customers and in that space, talk to me about your feedback loop. Like, how are you keeping that authentic and keeping that engaged so you actually know? Because a lot of times, right, when your other parts of the business are removed, right, and you get to directly interact and hear and get that feedback around your product and around what you're doing. Like, talk to us about how do you do that part of your job and ensure that you're actually engaging with the customer in a very real manner with the things that are important to them versus oftentimes what a lot of companies do, they project, right? Like, oh, this is what's important to the customer. And the customer's like, no, it's not what's important to me at all. And it's complicated. I understand that part, but
and the use case is complicated, right? It's like, I want to do this thing. And I can have a 5-minute conversation with someone and they can say, this is what I want it to do. And I'm like, oh, I get it. I understand it. And I'm relaying that back to the product team. And they're like, but what about this, this, and that? And I'm like, oh, I didn't ask those questions. Right. So we have a pretty robust way that we do it. We have a platform that we use, which is literally all around collecting user feedback. And that is something that internally our team uses to communicate that information back to the product team, but actually built in within Breezeway's product, there is a product portal. And so at any time our clients can go in, they can see what we're looking for information on, they can provide feedback, they can see things that we're working on, things that are about to come up into beta, they can put in new suggestions, and everything that gets put in there, just like if our team internally did it, gets directly funneled to the product team. And then they're looking at it, sort of boiling it up and then saying, okay, there's enough interest in, X to, there's enough interest in another department within the platform that we should start exploring that. And then all of the people who have given that feedback then become sort of the folks that the product team is engaging with to say, okay, I understand that you told Koryn this, but I need to dig into it a little bit more. And how does it really work? And so we collect the feedback and put it into that platform. They're reviewing it on a regular cadence and then doing direct outreach to those folks to actually have the conversations. And there are some things, right, where, okay, I've heard that the clients want a 4th category in Breezeway's platform. I understand why they want it, like totally makes sense. You don't need to have those conversations, but there are other things that are, I just talked to a client yesterday and she's like, oh, well, when a reservation goes from a checkout to a back-to-back, you change it to my back-to-back work. And that changes the cleaner. And it's like, okay. And for this client, right, they may want that to happen. They may want the cleaner to stay, but for someone else, they may not. And so, I'm the first to say, like, I have a good pulse on a lot of things that our clients want, but there are a lot that you got to talk to them in order to get the right information.
It's use case, like unless they're actually in the weeds doing it, they're the ones that know. And you hit the nail on the head when you said, like, you're going to get some suggestions that are like one-offs that would only be a great suggestion for that one company because they do things a little bit backwards. And it's not backwards to them, but it's backwards to the majority of the industry. And because they're doing it this way, they need this fix. And maybe that's not a priority for you. But overall, when you can take all this information and look at it and go, man, we're 75% of the people really would love this product. And sorry.
No, I was just going to say the other thing I think is also like, is being able to say, hey, we're not going to do that. Right. We're not going to build that, because you could give clients every option. I want it to do this or I don't. I want it to do this or I don't. But that very quickly becomes overwhelming.
And something then you can't manage.
Choice, like there's so many choices. I don't know where to go. So now I'm stopped and I don't do anything. And so I think it's a fine line that every tech company has to sort of ride around, like giving people what they want and understanding whether, like, I'm just saying this because I don't like the way it's happening and this is what I think it should do, but also kind of trying to uncover what is the real problem that you're looking to solve. And what is that actual, because not just because it's the easiest option might not be the best one long-term for everyone. It's just it's a quick Band-Aid fix. So kind of trying to get to the root cause, I think, is super important. And for us, that means, right, having those conversations, getting beta users on, as I'm sure it does for many, right? But being able to say, okay, yep, this works or this doesn't, or I need to tweak X, Y, or Z. So
I think a lot of it's great points, first of all. And I think a lot of it, to take it a step further, is even going to go into like UX and UI, some user interface and user experience stuff, where, you're talking about beta testing, and you're talking like there's a lots of different things that on paper, or in thought are a great idea. But then when you actually put it into practice or functionality on, say, your app or desktop or however you're doing it, and you're like, oh, this is just way too cumbersome. Or, by doing this, like now the experience is shit, because, we were doing this amazing flow, and it was doing this and everyone was happy. And now we've had this one little thing and like, I don't think enough credit is given to like UX and UI teams for truly driving this experience for our for the Hopper, for any, for Addies, for Breezeway, for all of our companies. Like that process and that journey that they take is as important as what you're offering.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you're looking at something that's super clunky and doesn't make sense, you're not going to get buy-in, right? You're going to be like, well, this is too hard. And I have 6 other, because it's, and I don't know, if you guys would necessarily like agree with me on this, but like, there are systems that have existed that are like, everything had to be in it, right? I remember 10 years ago when everyone was like, if it doesn't integrate with Escapia, I'm not using it, or insert whatever software it was. If it's not in there, if it's not a light box or a widget or whatever, I'm not doing it. And I think we've, as an industry, grown to understand that, like, hey, there's all of these amazing tools, and if we limit ourselves to being stuck in one, we're going to miss some things that could be really impactful for our business. But it also means that if those really nice things that are impactful to the business aren't easy to use, you're not going to use them, and you're always going to be in that one system.
And I can add an exclamation mark to that point, because as someone who managed and is managing recently, like John, I say this a lot, and it's so true. You do not understand what these property managers go through until you've been in their shoes and had to work on their schedules and their times and use these products and, entertain guests. And it's things that are nice in theory, but don't work well in the application of someone's business. They are not going to use it. Like, it may be great. It may work down the line, but if you can't get it to that point, you can forget about it. They just don't have time or the patience to execute on those things. It's just not where their time frame or mindset is.
Well, and I also think like it's that buy-in, right? Anybody that's like looking, I always say this, if you're looking to invest in new technology, have the user who's going to be doing it actually involved in that process. Because if you're like, oh, we're going to buy this, and I don't know, I know about how they schedule, but I don't really know how they schedule. And then you're like, here's this thing I bought you. And they're like, wait, what? Like, they're not, to your point, Mateo, they're not going to use it. And then you've wasted your time, their time, you signed a contract on something, like, creates a whole lot more work. And like, get the buy-in from the end user before you make those decisions. And
I'm
I
sure
when
you're doing demos with your prospects or your potential clients, the whole point, you're going to get their housekeeping manager involved. You're going to get their operations manager involved in actually being a part of that demo process, in getting their, you talked about getting their buy-in. They have to see it. They have to see, what do you like about it? What, what's better? What isn't as good? Like, these are valuable things for you. They're like, hey, I use XYZ product and they do this, and I actually like it better than your product, but all these other things that you do are amazing. So I can kind of see, these are just, it's part of that demo process, which those that aren't on a vendor and or a buying situation don't understand, like that dance, the vendor demo dance.
But I think, right, like as the person who, my team does all of the implementations for clients. And I think you would be surprised at how often somebody who is going to use this on a day-to-day is seeing a product for the first time after it's been purchased. And, you're totally right. No software, if you can find one, like, I would love to see it. Like, no software is going to check every box, right? There's always going to be the box that's half checked or not checked at all. And you have to prioritize what's most important for your business. People ask me all the time, what PMS should I use? What do you integrate best with? And it's like, you need to look at the PMSs, get your top 3, get your top 5, and then I can talk to you about how our integration looks. Because if you solely base, I'd love it if you solely base what PMS you buy off of how we integrate with them. But at the end of the day, that's the opposite of what you really want to do, right? Find something that works for your business, and then
at the end of the day,
too, forcing someone into doing something that's not a good fit, right? Like, a lot of this is relationships, in our industry, even at this level, right? Especially with the tech providers, who are providing a crucial, aspect of the business or solution for the business. And, it takes an immense amount of time, right? To go through a sales cycle to get someone to purchase. And then, it's not like it's just, turn the switch on and turn the switch off. And a lot of products don't work that way. So there's a lot of time, energy, and money invested in going through these processes. And it's such a disappointment when when people feel oversold or and underdelivered, right? And I think things are getting better. And from the property manager side of the business too, I think it's also been a learning process, because even in the short time that I've been in this industry, I've seen the advancement in tech and push towards tech and the adoption of this technology. And, it's been a challenge and will continue to be a challenge, but it is getting better. And these processes and these products are getting better, and they're working, right? And we're seeing that and seeing the growth. So I think that's exciting.
It's necessary too. It's necessary, especially with the right now, the workforce in our space is diminishing. It's necessary for this tech to kind of step up and kind of pick up some of that slack that is necessary to keep these businesses running. Because 10 years ago, a company that had 100 units was running on potentially twice as many employees as they are today. So the tech was necessary to go ahead and to keep these businesses running and not only profitable, but let's go back to the user and the guest experience. That's obviously the most important, because if you're not keeping your homeowners and your guests happy, you don't have a business anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that, like, there are certain parts of the business where tech can make up for, like, the lack of human resources, but operations is not one of them, right? Somebody has to manually, physically go out and clean and inspect or service, things when they go out. And so when you think about, like, tech from that side of it, it's like, okay, how do I, like, make my people more effective and give my people what they need so that we're doing stuff right the first time versus having to do it multiple times. And I think that it's interesting. I don't know that there's a way where that part of the business doesn't or can't be fully reliant on people. And I know that's been one of the hardest things for managers in the last, 12, 18 months, right? Is staffing. And, you used to be able to work with 2 cleaners, but now you need 5 because they're only available half the time. And that's hard. And
keeping equality, right? Keeping that standard across the board, because in our industry, operations and customer service go hand in hand, right? And customer satisfaction go hand in hand, because if your operations can't execute, you're not going to have happy customers or customers at all. And, it's a balance, which I'm excited to see.
It's interesting. I did a panel, it was probably 2 or 3 years ago now. I just sort of fell into it. Amy High Note was doing it. She wasn't able to make the conference. She was like, can you do this for me? And I was like, sure. And one of the things, I remember the people that were on, I don't remember which one of them said it, so I won't be able to give them specific credit, but it was very much around recognizing that things aren't going to be perfect, but making sure that people do things perfectly, right? That you have the perfect execution of things, because things are going to go wrong, and a towel isn't going to be right, or you're going to miss a spot on the sink, or whatever that is. But giving your team the tools to execute perfectly, I thought was really important, because there's a very big disconnect sometimes between, like, I tell you I want this to be clean and you go clean it, and then I'm like, that's not clean, right? If you're not giving them the tools to know what your expectations are, you're not going to be able to be successful. And then your guest checks in, and then they're not happy, and it just creates that revolving circle that doesn't help.
Processes and SOP, these are important things to keep things running. Hey, you mentioned, Koryn, earlier, you mentioned products, and you mentioned, having influence from guests and from users to go ahead and keep evolving the Breezeway product overall. And you mentioned there's some things that are getting beta tested. Like, what are you most excited about that Breezeway is going to be coming out with, in the near future, or it's right there, it's getting beta tested? What do you think, like, either you're most excited about, or like your users, or like future users, are going to be most excited about with Breezeway?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I will say we recently, as in like Friday, launched the ability to translate the mobile app into, like, not always, for the last like probably 6 to 9 months, we've had the ability to like translate the like requirements, the like steps that need to be done. But we just on Friday launched what is, I don't know if it's like a common term, but what our team calls localization. And it's currently supported in Spanish. And that's obviously one of the most requested language supports that we see. So now a user can actually go into their app and change it so that everything is displaying in their local language of Spanish, or their native language of Spanish. And I'm really excited about that, because I think, going back to, what we talked about earlier, right, making it easy for people to use is what drives success. And so if I'm asking you to, you and I might be able to speak fine in an English conversation, but then I'm asking you to read English, that puts a lot of unnecessary burden on a team that's already really stressed and is doing a lot in a condensed period of time. So I'm really excited about that. We got a lot of really positive feedback around that. And then,
that's awesome, by the way. That ties into the in the inclusiveness. And you, as Breezeway, as a global company, you're pushing globally. You're in the EU. You're working on,
I think it's 19 countries.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm assuming, my assumption is that obviously, Spanish is number one, but you're going to be going ahead and offering other options here sooner than later.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking, but the team, we focused on Spanish, and what we have now, I think, is supported the localization. So the full app being translated is in Spanish, but you can change like the requirements. So like the things you need to do, what the manager says need done, that can actually already be translated into it. Basically there's like 80 languages that are supported. So, it's not perfect. It's not everything, but it does, it does give folks, it makes it a little bit easier if you're outside of the Spanish language. But it's important, right? You've got people who are trying to do a lot, and I think that's really exciting to be able to give them to deliver the product to them in the language that is preferred for them. But I'm actually really excited. We're doing a lot. The team is working really, really diligently. For us, we can't really release a lot of things in the middle of summer, right? So many companies are slammed and busy. So you're not going out like changing the product in like July and being like, oh, it doesn't work the same way now. People would literally murder us. Yeah. So, but we're working on a lot of stuff that'll launch in the fall. And one of those things is an improvement and many enhancements to our scheduling, and giving people the ability to sort of say, okay, these are, I'll use like a company that operates in the Panhandle and in Breckenridge, right? This is the work that gets done on the Breckenridge properties versus the Panhandle properties. And we do this 3 days before arrival and this 2 days after departure. And really giving managers the ability to dig in and to even more granularly assign and complete work at the properties is going to be really, really exciting. It's something that people have been clamoring for. And so I'm excited to be able to see that hit the ground this fall.
So that'll be ready for conference season coming on the heels of the high seasons in the summer.
I hope so. I don't have an exact release date, but they've been working on it for a couple of months. So I'm hoping, I would imagine it's a Q3, early Q4 release. So hopefully Andrew, our VP of product, isn't listening and doesn't get mad at me, but it's coming. It's in beta, not in beta, but it's sort of out and we can sort of see it and play with it. A lot of work, but again, it's also one of those things, right? We're going to hold on to that until we're really confident, because that scheduling piece is the crux of our system. So you release something that doesn't work 1,000% and, all hell breaks loose, right?
Right.
So we want to make sure we may hold on to it longer than we might necessarily need, but I'm really excited about that. It's something we hear from people a lot. And, we are able to sort of tailor it with like some of the stuff that we already do, but I think this is going to be a game changer for folks.
It's awesome.
Nice.
Where are we going to see you next? We're going to see you at
next up, I'm at DARM in Nashville.
See you there.
And
shout out to Amy and the DARM crew. Yeah, we'll see you guys there.
It's gonna be a great event. Amy always puts on great events, but
yes, she does.
This is gonna be pretty awesome, and everybody loves Nashville, right?
Can't go wrong in Nashville.
Yeah, and then Breck for the VRMA Connect at the end of August, and then the usual suspects all throughout the fall.
Oh, it's September is a shit show.
It's I just my
really
sister just asked me for my calendar, and she was like, that's a lot of travel, and I was like,
yeah, it is.
In fact,
I think from August through October, it's nonstop.
We saw VRMA added Annapolis now too.
Yes, December 5th.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Stretch it out a little longer there.
Yeah, let's just keep going all the way to Christmas.
An interesting one. Yeah.
Annapolis will be interesting. I think there's there's the tri-state area and that whole eastern seaboard. There's so many operators. Yeah. And there hasn't really been an event over there.
No.
That I
they go up and do some stuff in New England, but never South. I mean, the nice thing, you're going to be able to cover Chincoteague, all of Maryland, Ocean City, that whole area there, Jersey,
Norfolk, Virginia Beach, all those Virginia
Addie's a site. They're like, this is the best spot for you.
Yeah.
Well, but also for the industry too, because what we found out is, there's industry there, right? That's military, absolutely, right? But on the other side of our business, there's short-term, and vacation rental managers in that space, and a lot of overlooked people in that space. So it'd be good to shine some light there and get them some resources and get them to the industry.
It's great. It's wild. There's just, I think we're seeing as an industry, right, so many new faces. Many new faces, and it's pretty exciting. I'm not going to lie. It makes me feel like I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm like, I don't know half the people in this room, but I just have to find them and meet them. So it's exciting.
Yeah. That's what it's all about, right?
Opportunities for sure. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah. That's why we do what we do. This is it's a highlight of our week.
Yeah.
Hey, Koryn, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. It was awesome getting to know you. It was awesome getting to talk a little bit about Breezeway and where you're going and your journey to there. So really excited that you joined our show, and until next time.
I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. And we'll see you this fall.
Absolutely.
Have a great week.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.